There are several products that are made out of paper that make it possible to sew accurate half-square triangles very easily. My favorite is triangle paper on a roll because I can roll it out to the length I need and can go clear across the fabric from selvage to selvage, and in one continuous sew I can create several half-square triangles at one time. In this particular case, we only need 4 half-square triangles, so I just need one of these rectangular units. So I need to cut on the black lines because the solid lines on this paper are all of the lines that you cut on. The dashed lines are the ones that you sew. So I am going to cut this. You can use scissors, your paper scissors, or if you want to cut with a rotary cutter, be sure that you're using a Creative Grids product because they have gripper on the outside edge and it grips the paper, and so the paper won't slide while I'm rotary cutting. But if you're using a ruler that doesn't have gripper on the back, it slips on the paper and it's very difficult to get accurate cuts. All I'm going to use is this little tiny rectangle of triangle paper, and I'm going to place it on 2 rectangles of fabric that are cut 4.5 by 8.5 inches. So by cutting 2 rectangles, I'm going to end up with 4 half-square triangles in just a matter of minutes. I put them together, light fabric on dark fabric, right sides together, and then I'm going to place this in the middle. Don't try to take the edge and shove it up here because this is just going to be a little bit of a scrap that gives you a little bit of a wiggle room. And so if everything isn't exactly perfect, your half-square triangles will finish, and they'll still be perfect. I'm just going to take a couple of pins and I'm pinning them well out of the way of where I'm going to be sewing. So I'm just doing this, and all I have to do is hold this foundation in place so I can take it to the sewing machine, and I am going to sew 2 V's. Now it doesn't matter if I'm following the arrows on the paper or not because those are to help me sew, but that's really if I'm sewing a whole series of these the entire width of the fabric. I just need to sew 2 V's. It doesn't matter if I go off the fabric and back, or off of the foundation and back on, because I am going to be cutting on the entire outside edge because these were solid black lines. So I'm going to go sew and show you that I'm going to just sew 2 V's on these dash lines. I'm going to turn this over so that you can see that I sewed 2 complete V's, and now I'm going to remove the pins, and this was a solid black line because I just needed 4 half-square triangles. So I need to cut on the outside edge of this, and there's just a black line right inside here. So I need to trim those off too. A lot of times beginners forget to remove that little slip there, and so their half-square triangles aren't square when they're done. So it doesn't matter what order you cut them, it just matters that you cut all of the black solid lines. I usually cut the longest ones first. And again, using a Creative Grids ruler, because of the gripper, it doesn't slip on the paper so you don't accidentally slice your blocks to the wrong size. Now I have 2 squares, but I'm not done because I have to cut that center line right here. Now when I open this up, you'll see that I've created 4 half-square triangles. I'm going to go ahead and take these to the ironing board and press them open before I remove that paper, because this is a square, this is on the straight of grain, but this is on the bias, so there's a lot of stretch on this edge, and the paper will stabilize that while I'm pressing, so I'll still have a perfect square when I'm done. So I'm going to press all 4 of these, and the reason I put the triangle paper with the light fabric on top, you'll notice that when I press these open, the seam is going to be pressed towards the dark automatically. So if you don't press your seams open and you want to press them to the side, it's automatically going to be positioned behind the color that you want. Now I've pressed all 4 half square triangles, and see, the paper is this way, which means the seam is pressed towards the dark side. Now before I do anything else, I'm going to clip these tails. And you can do this with a rotary cutter. If that makes you nervous, use a pair of scissors, but I'm going to remove those tails on all 4 blocks. And if you'll notice, these are all perfect half square triangle, and there's no distortion created by having to sew on the bias of the fabric. The paper stabilizes it, and so your blocks end up being perfect and you don't have to square them up to size when you're done. That's why I love using triangle paper, but triangle paper is not available in all sizes. So you have to check with the specific companies. Triangle paper on a roll is available, I think, from 1 inch to 6 inch sizes and every ½ inch in between. But sometimes you need blocks that are a different size or half square triangles that are a different size. So that's when I revert back to the more traditional way where you put 2 squares together, draw a line, and sew on each side of it. But if I can use this, I always use this product. In one of those rolls, they retail for $10 or $12, but it is normally enough half square triangle to make an entire queen size quilt. So since I'm only doing small blocks, I can use one of those for years and still have every size I need available in my fingertips. Okay, so now I'm going to take this and I'm going to show you how to remove the paper, because most people start pulling from this corner, but since I stitched here, if I start putting stretch on or stress there, I'm going to be putting stress on that seam I just sewed, and some of the stitching is going to come out. So pick it up from the center and don't be gentle, just tear it in both directions, and it's going to come right away, and then I can pull this away. Now, if you follow the instructions on the paper, they tell you to sew with a shorter seam stitch length right here. I don't bother because you saw how easy that pulled out, and the default on most machines is 12 stitches per inch. If I reduce that stitch length to 16 per inch, it's going to take me 30% longer to sew that seam, and there's no reason for it. So now you can see that I've removed the paper. If I place this right here, you can see that it is perfectly square and it is exactly within a 3½ inch, so there's absolutely no distortion to my block. But we're going to take it one step further, because in my technique, I always press my seams open so it eliminates any bulk in those seams. So now I'm going to go press the seam open and show you what happens. Now when I press that seam open, because I clipped my tails when it was pressed to one side, all of my tails are gone. And when I press the seam open, I have a perfect half square triangle. So you can use this method to do any of the blocks in the books that use half square triangles, or you can use that to take and make 4 half square triangles and turn them into a pinwheel. So the choices are limitless at this point, but look how fast and easy they were to create.